Welcome back to the Pastor Pod. We're glad you're here and that you take some time to join us. I am in Venice, Florida. I'm a pastor at the Bridge Church, and I'm here with my good friend Jay every week, having great, honest conversation. My good, amazing friend up in the Northeast, Jay Mudd.
That's right. Josh is down on the island, and I'm up here in an icicle. That's how that works.
It's like 82 degrees here today, man. It's gotten really hot quick.
Drop the 2, and we're at 8 degrees here. In
just 80 degrees less. That's fine. Yeah, not a big deal.
No,
literally before we started this podcast, he's like, "Hey, man, I'm gonna go upstairs by the fire for like 5 minutes, and I'll be right back." And I was like, "You go do that."
Yes, I do. Literally, that's the way it is. So, yeah, Josh, always good to be here on the Pastor Pod. And listen, I'm really enjoying the conversations. These are great conversations. Today, we're talking about transparency, and I got to be honest, and I'm going to be upfront. I have trouble with the idea of transparency. I don't know what it is. It's not like I mind. I just don't usually. I'm not that kind. I'm not like show and tell or share your feelings. I'm not that guy.
Right.
And so
is that how you view it? Like someone like almost like a diary, like when this is how I'm feeling. This is my day.
Oh, that does not do well with me. I don't do well with that. That's not my kind of thing.
Yeah. But I feel like you're pretty transparent though. Like you seem to always tell me how you're doing. And even on the Pastor Pod, it's easy for you to share about your family and your life. And
sometimes, but I guess maybe when I hear the word transparent, I'm like, how transparent do you want me to be?
So let's talk about that today. And I think everyone that's listening in, I think we all struggle with being transparent. I do too. I mean, I think the older I've gotten, the more selective I am about who I'm transparent with because of different experiences.
Yeah.
Or maybe I was too transparent, or maybe I shared too much, or I shared too little. And, I went to social media earlier today. Of course, we're recording a little earlier than this podcast coming out, but I asked, social media, I asked Instagram, Facebook, why people struggle with being transparent. Well, so we'll get into that a little bit with some of your responses, but this is a big deal when it comes to being a pastor because, we're called to be examples. We're people just like everybody else, but at the end of the day, we're called to be real. We should not be living a different lifestyle than who we are on the stage or behind the pulpit on Sunday should be the same Josh, the same Jay, same whoever on Monday. But at the same time, how do you get to the point where you're transparent, honest, real? And are you supposed to be that way with everyone? And so let's talk about that today.
Yeah. And again, you said something very interesting. You said you should be the same person you are on Sunday, whether it be on a platform, wherever, behind a music stand, whatever you got that you're preaching from or teaching from, you should be that same person on Monday. And I got to thinking about something that I often, this is a good reference that I often ask my kids that, do you see the same person on the weekend as you do on Monday night at home and Tuesday? Because if you want a real answer, that's where you'll get
that's
it.
good. Well, that's
where you'll get it. That's where you'll get it. You'll get it from your kids. Because that's something that I really do. I want my kids not to see a different person. I didn't grow up as a PK or MK or, a ministry of any kind kid. My parents didn't really go to church. But I hear the stories, kind of like horror stories almost, of pastors' kids who would say, my parent was this type of person on the weekend in front of people, but not at home. And so I guess I could start with that. If you're looking for a quiz and you're going, I wonder if I'm transparent of the same person. If you have kids in your home, ask and be okay with the answer, and maybe even preface it with like, you're not in trouble if you tell me I'm not, or whatever it may be. But
until they answer it, you're like, go to your room. I'm kidding. You're grounded for 20 days. No, that's a great question. That really gets to the heart of it. So the fact that you said you're not transparent, I mean, I think you really are. I think that's a humility as a dad, as a pastor, as a leader, to say, hey, give me a heart check. Like, what are you seeing?
Right. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it's more of I'm selective with who I share what with.
True.
I think that's
true for everybody most of the time. Now, some people are transparent too much. Like some people go to Facebook and they share everything, and that's not what we're talking about today. So let's go ahead and preface that. social media or whatever is not a place to emotionally vomit.
But Josh, it's my page and I can write what I want.
Yeah, I can do whatever I want. Yes, that's true. That is true. But yeah, I mean, how do you, I guess the better question today, as we've discussed this, why do pastors struggle being transparent? Of course, this applies to every person, but let's talk about mainly pastors, leaders. If you're a leader in any way, I think in a church, you're serving, you're leading, you're doing your best to represent Christ. Why do we struggle with that? And I think we're going to get into that today.
Yeah, and I think that's I think there's reasons why pastors struggle as much as they do, and I think every pastor would say to a level they struggle with it, and it's because you feel like I know when Holly and I got married, the pastor who did our premarital counseling was phenomenal, and we got done. I was like, hey, can you do some extra premarital counseling with us? What it's like to be a married couple. Now, just speaking directly to pastors, there is something to be said about being a married couple in ministry, because you're almost living in this glass globe where everyone sees everything, and it's almost as if, like, where can I not worry about somebody seeing something that whether I've got a temper or whatever it is, because I am pretty transparent about that. I'll tell myself all the time if I make a mistake or if I do something wrong. But there is this idea, there's a fear of that somebody's going to look down on me for something I say or something I do, and things of that sort. So I think there's a level where you feel as if you're in a glass globe, and nowhere you turn, somebody's not looking at you. Yes. And I feel like that's somewhat of the struggle and the tension that a pastor feels when they're saying, how transparent can I be? Can I be transparent? What can I share? How can I share it in a way that's not gonna somebody's not gonna take it the wrong way?
Yeah, you don't want to be misunderstood.
Right.
I was about, my dad's a pastor, so I grew up in 5 states in the Southeast. So I'm kind of like a Southeastern mutt. But mainly most of my life I've been in Florida. So I claim Florida as home. But anyway, different churches. I remember, like, literally we lived at a church in Texas. We lived in a pastorium. If you don't know what a pastorium is, you can Google it. But basically, it's the pastor's house on the church property. So basically, people would stop by at all times of the day, all times of the night. They literally like look into the window and like wave at us. So I remember like I think I was like 14 or 15, like thinking, man, I want to go jump on the trampoline in the backyard, but I'm afraid, me and my brother, we love to box on the trampoline. So they probably think we're psychos, which we kind of were. But, so this whole transparency thing, it runs deep with me, because there were people that misread my family or would say things to us like, better not mess up because your daddy's the pastor. Or they would say things like, if we're playing basketball or playing the sport, there's just this different, sometimes people treat ministry kids different. And one of the things I'm burdened for my kids is I want them to not only live for Jesus and represent Christ, because that's what we're all supposed to do as a follower of Jesus, but I don't want to put extra stress on their life that they have to live up to this perfection level. And I think that's why a lot of pastors struggle with being transparent, because we're not perfect. And we say that, we joke about it. I don't know about you, Jay. I get up a lot of times and I tell people our church is imperfect. It's led by an imperfect pastor that's seeking to follow a perfect savior. But no matter how much you say that, people tend to put you on a pedestal. And the other struggle is, when does a pastor ever, quote unquote, off? When is he ever able to hang out with someone and not just discuss all the church stuff, but just be a man of God, hang out with your spouse, with another family, and just talk about your life, not just talk about the next sermon series or the next, like we're in a building campaign. Like, when can we just let's just move that stuff aside and let's just be us. Let's just be. Yeah.
I think you're really hitting on some areas where the pastor tends to turn and go, like, I need to close up a little bit, because they don't know when they're off.
That's right.
I know even, and again, I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations where, a couple in the church or people in the church want to come hang out, and I'm like, yeah, let's hang out. We'll grab some food and just, and it always happens. Okay. So I got a question. And all of a sudden we've turned business.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, wait a minute. Can we just talk about football? Can we just talk about like how your kids are doing? but it always turns shop talk.
And I know that's about you. Like, you love people, and I love talking about it. Like, I honestly could talk about church and the Lord all day long. I love what I do, just like you do, Jay. But there's times when you're just, like you said, I need to just give it to the Lord, and I need to watch a basketball game and eat popcorn.
Right. I have one. We have a couple here. I would say probably our closest couple that we hang out with, and we'll go out on date nights, things like that. I have a 13-year-old daughter that owes me childcare for the rest of her life because she has a cell phone. And so parents, that's a key thing right there. If you've got kids,
that's a good takeaway.
Listen, they don't have to pay for their cell phone, but they have to watch the other kids anytime I want them to. Date nights for life. Anyhow, so we'll go on a date night, and we preface the date night with no shop talk. And if there's a preface of no shop talk, it means we cannot talk about church, ministry, anything while we're on that date night. And because we need that. And it's taken us a long time to find a couple that we can actually do that with and actually upholds the recommendation of no shop talk. But I think that's the biggest thing. And then you tack on the day and age we live in today, where, me growing up in church, social media wasn't a thing, but today social media is a thing. And now, because of, us being pushed into where we're at now, everyone live streams, everything's being recorded, everything you say can and will be used against you. And that is the truth. Anything.
Well, people take like sermon blur, like they'll go and edit, like take out like a 30-second piece of a sermon online and then go on Twitter and just eviscerate some pastor. And they haven't listened to the whole context. I mean, that's just happening all over the place. So I think it is a hard time for pastors to be transparent and knowing who that is. And so I think, just like everybody that's listening, we all struggle with it. Here's a few answers that you guys turned in today of why we struggle being transparent. Somebody said because people struggle with being judged. Another person said they're afraid of being judged, of course, or misunderstood. I think that's when I struggle with sometimes, the whole being misunderstood. So one other person said having fear and anxiety of other people's opinions. No one is without sin to cast that first stone, and how we can sometimes forget that. Another person said to control the way others may view them. Someone said fear of judgment and wanting to look like you have it all together, quote unquote. And then one good friend of mine said scared of losing credibility to the other person. And so those are just a few. They're still like coming in on my Instagram, and a lot of people being transparent about their struggle with it.
Right. Well, you're giving them a space and a safe space because they trust you. They trust you, and they trust you're gonna keep it confidential, even though it's on the podcast, but you're keeping it confidential. Of who it is. It's an anonymous, and they trust you. They trust you with that information. So you've built a comfort place. And you said earlier, some of those were people that you knew personally that were willing to say that. And I think about it, that pastors need that space. They need somewhere they can go. And I would encourage you, if you're listening, you're not a pastor, consider being that person for your pastor. Just a safe friend that they can go and they can spend time with, and they can take off their hat. They can take off whatever they have to, whatever, personality or whatever they may have to put on, or whatever, they take it off and just be them. We need safe places like that. And a lot of times you would think that a pastor can find that in another pastor, and they can be transparent with other pastors. Do you find that to be true, Josh, that pastors can be transparent with other pastors?
I think we should. I think it is easier to relate, to go, how are you doing? And then, think about the last year and a half. Oh, how's things going with how you guys are responding to COVID, or how are you reopening? All that kind of stuff is easy to talk about. When I think of transparency, I think it's below the surface. It's not how's your family? How's the kids? Tell me about what sermon series are you doing, or whatever it is. It's when you get below the surface of like, how are you really doing?
Right.
Like, how are you really? Don't give me the everything's great. What do you ask at church? Like, how are you doing? Oh, everything's great. I always joke with the church on the way there. Everybody's like screaming at each other in the car because they were running late. But then they walk in and it's like the church face, right? It's like, oh yeah, we're great. Praise the Lord. right? But the whole way there, they're like, oh, scream. I mean, we all struggle with being real, because I think one of the reasons we don't want people to think that we're not who they want us to think they are, which is also a really unhealthy place to be living in a world where you're not transparent with anyone. It really breeds a lot of depression, I think, isolation. And I think for me personally, with another pastor, I'm going to build a relationship first before I share the deeper parts of my life. I think just like anybody else, I don't think we're a lot different than anyone else. But if I'm going to entrust not a bunch of secrets that I'm doing a bunch of things that are wrong or inappropriate as a pastor that would make me step down from my role, I just struggle because I have opened up to certain pastors, or I've heard the way that they talk about other pastors. And I think, well, if he talks about that pastor, he probably will talk about me. And that's a principle for all of us. If people come to you all the time and tell you about what everyone else is doing, they will do the same thing to you. So I also kind of run that through the filter. If someone is breaking trust and sharing things that, like I said, I'm not trying to hide anything. We're not trying to cover up anything, but just a struggle I'm going through, or I need prayer, I'm entrusting that to you, and I'm trusting that information because it's a safe place. And I think we all want that safe place. And if that the other person is listening, and if there is something in my life that I need correction, I hope that they have the full support for me, for them to say, hey, Josh, listen, I'm with you, I'm for you, but let me lean into that. I want to pray for you and help and pray that God will do a work in your heart and not let me off the hook. But yeah, that's how I think over the years, I've definitely jumped in a little too quickly sometimes. And so maybe I don't know if that's a good thing sometimes, but I am a little bit slower in who I open up to.
I think it comes with time, just like any other relationship. It comes with time and building that relationship, because there is, and we talked about it on the podcast before, so we don't need to get into it, but it's that idea also that if I say, hey, I need prayer, I'm struggling, that comes with layers of, well, what does that mean? And there can be assumptions. And then there's, compare, like, well, do they think I'm falling apart? Do they think I'm failing? Do they think, so then it's like, there's this judgment of that we're putting on that person that maybe they're putting on us, but we're concerned to the point where, like, if I admit that I'm struggling, or I admit I need prayer, then that person may judge me, or may think that I'm failing, or, because I'm not living up to whatever standard I put as a successful pastor.
I've struggled with this. Like if I've ever had a really stressful time, and I've had a lot of those, we helped plant a church in Jacksonville with a wonderful church there, and going through all the issues of like the facility. And, we had one facility where there was just the AC was not working, and we had lots of bug issues, and just, it was beyond the normal church ministry, church planning experience. All that was extra stress. So I've learned from that. Just go talk to Jesus and journal about it. That is also another thing I've learned as well.
Right. I think it's a good safe space. Pastors can relate to one another, what they're going through, the pressures of being a pastor, and kind of being in that globe, or whatever it may be. There are things that pastors go through that only pastors could really understand. I think. And that's not putting pastors on a pedestal. It's sort of like if you work at in retail. I don't understand anything about the pressures of living in retail, working in retail, but somebody else working in retail, they would understand that. That's what I mean by that. So it's not but that's why it's a safe space for pastors to go to other pastors and have that kind of conversation. But transparency, on one hand, we want to protect it. We want to say, hey, who can I be transparent with? Who can I be real with? Who can I have those conversations with? But let's flip the script a little bit. And is there a place where it's too far, and you can go too far with transparency, specifically like in the context of your church and when you're preaching and things of that sort? Because, you may have, I've actually been in church services where I get a little uncomfortable. I'm like, whoa. But what do you think? What do you think? Is there a space where you can go too far within the context of your church, Josh?
By the way, I think we're having a really honest conversation today, Jay. I just really feel like we've gone really. So if you're listening and you're like, man, these guys are, listen, we try our best to be real and transparent on this podcast, but we really, just like any leader listening, I think we all can echo and say, this is a struggle, and we want to be as healthy as we can. But I think it's awesome to be transparent when you're preaching, when you're teaching, when you're relating to people. I try my best to, when I'm teaching a passage or explaining something, to, of course, you don't want to be the hero of the story and go, well, let me just tell you all the ways I'm doing this well, because the honest truth is I'm not, and I'm learning it. And I've already had a whole week of letting the Lord convict me before I've communicated it to the church. And so I try to tie in how I'm learning this, how God's changing me, and where I need to grow. And I think that's awesome. I think people lean into that. I think that when another pastor teaches, I lean into that because I know that we're in this together. I think you do a great job of that, Jay. When I hear your messages, you do a great job of connecting your heart and what you're learning in that. I do think it can also be extreme the other way, where I've also seen pastors almost treat the congregation like they're the counselor, and they're giving their like download of all their issues, and it's the sermon is focused upon them. And so I think there's definitely there should be a healthy way to do this, be transparent, but also keep it pointed to Christ. I had a pastor, my dad's, of course, a pastor. We were in a little church one time, and he shared a story. I don't remember what the story was. I was in high school. Of course, he would embarrass us growing up. Oh yeah, this week Josh did blah, blah, blah. So I'm like on the front row, like, here we go again. And which it taught me not to take myself so seriously. So it really did prepare me for ministry. But one of these head deacons went up to him and really reamed him out and said, listen, you don't never air your dirty laundry to our church. Never talk about your weaknesses. And of course, my dad was like, well, I don't. And I'm trying to follow Jesus. And, it was I learned from that conversation, because they didn't want to hear that their pastor had, gotten upset at the kids and was too angry and had to ask for forgiveness. He stand the thought that, because for some reason they wanted their pastor to be viewed as Mr. Perfect, right? And which isn't true. None of us are perfect. And so that's just one example I learned growing up, like model myself after that. Don't become that guy that need change.
I think there's something real when a pastor can show and demonstrate that they're not perfect. Because I think, unfortunately, there is a picture that the pastor has his act together, that, he knows. I told my church this past weekend, I said, I love that people like to ask me questions like, oh, you're the pastor. Here's my deep theological question. And I've gotten extremely comfortable with saying, I don't know. I don't know the answer. And I said, you don't have to know all the answer. We forget that the very basic definition of a disciple is a learner.
That's right.
And we're learning. We're all learning. Your pastor is learning. I'm learning. You're learning, Josh. We're all learning. And we don't know all the answers. We may have some good, strong convictions on things.
That's right.
But we may not know all the answers. And the truth be told is there's a lot of things that we're not going to know until it's all said and done. And we're not going to care. Because we're going to be standing before our Savior, and it's not going to matter.
That's right.
I think there is a piece where there is a transparency piece where pastors should be willing to show where they have dropped the ball. And they're not perfect. And I think that is actually the most relatable thing we can do as pastors, is help people to see that we're just normal people, just like them. We're no different. Because what happens is the same thing happens in Bible, is we read about Moses, we read about Noah, we read about all these characters, and we think they're special people. Listen, they were just normal people. We paint the wrong picture. They breathed just like we did. They had blood in our veins just like we do. They lived a little bit longer than we do, according to what Scripture says. If you however you want to think of it, it seems like they did. But the truth of the matter is they were just normal people. And when we start reading the Bible that way, it changes a little bit of our perspective. And I think we need to paint pastors in the same light. And so it's important that I believe we are transparent. But again, on the flip side, there is a point where we need to make sure it stays about Jesus and what Jesus is doing in and through his people.
The other side of it, too, the unhealthy side, is transparency can also lead to manipulation. As leaders, we have to be careful how we say things. I've heard stories of pastors sharing personal needs from the stage, and then like the whole church pitches in for that need because they feel like It's a cry for help. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying it's not wrong to meet needs. But I do think we have to be transparent in a healthy way, not for selfish gain,
right?
Not to somehow, maneuver the people to do something for us or that we want for the church. I think we have to really guard our heart in that way, that we're not transparent for a selfish reason, because that gets really icky and gross. And I just don't think that's healthy for us as leaders. It's just weird. Like, I've got multiple stories. I won't share them all. But it's like, you know what? People love their pastor and they want to support the staff and the church. And so, I think you could also be really unhealthy and just like abuse it, right? And, as well.
You heard it first here, though. We describe that as icky and gross. And so I just love
and sticky.
It's sticky. That's right. Icky,
There's
gross.
Three. It always has to be 3 words as a pastor. Yeah, but I do love having close friendships like you, Jay, and other men of God that I can call up anytime, any day and say, hey, this is what I'm going through.
Right.
And I need you to pray for me. Hey, tell me if I'm wrong. Please correct me. I have wonderful elders here. I've got a wonderful staff. I've got people that I've grown close to that we can talk about things and they can tell me, they can give me feedback.
Right.
And they can say, hey, here's an idea. Hey, when you said this is what I heard. I think humility is the goal of leadership, ultimately to maintain relationships. And I don't always do it that well. I'm still learning.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's a huge deal. Transparency is huge.
So how do we encourage pastors through this, though? How do we encourage pastors? What do we do to support pastors when it comes to transparency, Josh? How do we come alongside of them? How do we come alongside one another, even for the pastor listening? If you're not listening and if you're a pastor and you're not listening, you don't know what I'm talking about. But if you're if you're listening and you're not a pastor, how do you encourage pastors? And if you're a pastor, how do you encourage other pastors?
I think listen more than talk. I know I talk a lot. I'm a talker. Jay, most pastors love to talk. So, because that's kind of what we do. I think listen from the heart, connect with another pastor, go to lunch, hang out, go grab coffee, ask the question, how can I pray for you? Take your time getting to know them. If you're a pastor, don't start the conversation talking about church stuff and how big's your church and tell me about the campaign. And those are all, that can be a helpful conversation. But I think of like, how can I support the pastor and how he's doing, his wife, his kids? If you're in a church and you love your pastor and your staff or any of the leaders, think about how to support the kids and the wife. And, don't try to plan meetings on the pastor's day off. I mean, understand that they need family time sometimes, be thoughtful in that way. We have so many wonderful people here that pray for us, support us. And a lot of people really being transparent a lot of people have no idea what pastors do. I mean, I had a neighbor in Jacksonville that was new to church and he started he came to Christ, and he literally looked at me one day. He said, "What do you do?" I mean, do you just walk up there and just like make it up as you go? And I thought, I hope it didn't come across like that. I said, I worked hard on it. Of course, he gave me a hard time. And, he was like, he didn't have any church background. So it was just being real. And we talked a lot about it. And he was a mechanic. I said, listen, if we switched jobs, it wouldn't go well because I'm not a great mechanic. I said, but it would probably be interesting for you to see how each week is different. And, but also there's so much similarity with what we do as pastors. So, that's part of it as well.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would say one of the ways that I think pastors tend to lean into things is pastors are a lot of times they're fixers. They like to fix things. Don't feel like it's your job to fix the problem. Because a lot of times, Josh, when you're opening it up and you're being transparent, you're not looking for somebody to fix. You just need to get it out. You just need to talk about it. Yeah. And I think sometimes I'm guilty of this. I can be guilty of this. They're going, well, let me help you solve that.
Yeah, me too.
And the problem and the problem with that is a lot of times we don't know enough to be able to fix it. And they can also feel like, oh, I don't want somebody to come in here and necessarily fix. I need somebody just to listen to me.
Yeah.
And then, get permission to talk, get permission to give feedback. Because again, a lot can be said if you go, hey, can I share something I've observed? And if they say no, then okay, that's fine. but getting permission almost downplays it, and it helps the person receiving anything to receive it, because you ask for permission, and then if they say yes, then they're saying, hey, I'm ready to receive that.
I'm ready to receive. That's right.
I'm ready to receive
it.
Yeah,
because that's huge.
If we don't, then we try to fix it, and it can come across differently.
Yes.
And so, and again, I think even if you're not a pastor listening and you're saying, I want to talk to my pastor about something, but I'm not sure how to approach it. That's that conversation of, hey, can I share something I've observed or I'm observing? Can I share something? And that pastor is going to be more likely able to receive it differently than, hey, let me tell you something, and boom, hit them with whatever it may be. But transparency, it's a conversation, and being sensitive to that conversation, listening, loving, supporting, praying. And again,
I think this is huge though. I mean, I know there's been some well-known authors, pastors that have had moral failures, or things came out years later. You hate that. And I would also say for the few that are famous, well-known, that fall, and we hate that, we want them to be restored. We pray for them. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of leaders that by God's grace are not perfect, but have been faithful to their wife and have done their best to love their children and be in their life and be at their games, and not just spend all their time in ministry. So I do think that's sometimes out of whack, but I do think every leader, no matter where you're serving, how big your church is or little it is, or if you have a great online presence or whatever, I do think it's true that the Bible has a principle that says your sin will find you out. It's just a universal biblical principle that if I go through my ministry faking it till I make it, and I'm living a lie, and I'm making a lot of unwise decisions in every way, it will come out. So whether you choose to hide it now, like some of these leaders that I look up to, man, 30, 40 years go by, or maybe they're even ready to retire. And then all of a sudden, all this stuff that comes out, of course, many times it's very vindictive and not always true, but let's just say whatever it said happened. What would have happened differently if earlier on in their ministry, they built a team of people around them that they really can say, hey, listen, I love you and you love me, and I want you to love Jesus more than me, and I want you to call me out in love. I want you to correct me in love. I want you to watch over my soul. And I think every pastor wants that. We all want someone to care for us, not condemn us, not judge us. Every follower of Jesus wants that. We all want that. And we've been burned. We've all been hurt. If you've been in a church, you've had someone take something transparent you said and have shared that, and it has hurt you. So for all the church hurt, and it's a deep hurt, and I've been through a lot of it. But we have to also remember that our faith and our basis of being transparent is built upon the unconditional love of Christ, and keep our focus on him and not on people. But yeah, I think for me, man, I want to finish well. I want to be that, if God gives me a long time on this earth and I'm that really, really old guy, I hope I can step out of the full-time role as a pastor. And I hope that I can encourage the next generation to be transparent. So I think that's really a big piece of the Pastor Pod, man. I just really want to have conversations like this to teach and just encourage, like, hey, listen, there's too much at stake,
right?
Giving God glory and living a transparent life, not perfect, but hey, when we mess up, we're honest, we're real, we're humble.
And I think people, pastors, like, just don't know where to turn. I know from personal experience, my wife and I, we tell people all the time, there's no one that's too. I mean, I think about what people thought of Paul, but what Jesus saw in Paul, right?
Wow.
We make mistakes. Pastors make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not transparent and real about it, it can haunt us, as you said. It will find us out, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. But if they have that safe place, there are places. My wife and I have literally watched as people who have been written off. They've been written off. Yeah. Churches probably wouldn't take them, and we've mentored, we shepherded, we come alongside of, and to watching those people thrive in ministry now, it's just like, man. I'm glad
God's God of restoration.
I'm glad that didn't go to waste. I'm glad God saw value and put them somewhere, and they're still being used.
Yeah, God doesn't waste our pain
in a big way. And so, pastors, listen, if you need a safe space, find that safe space. Don't be afraid to talk. Don't be afraid to be real. And again, if there's anything we can do, and again, you don't know us, you don't know Josh and myself, but we do want to make sure that you have a safe space, and I'd love to chat. If you just need somebody to chat with, drop us an email, let us know. We'd love to chat with you. That email is thepastorpod@gmail.com, thepastorpod@gmail.com, because I think this is something that is so crucial and real. And there are big things at stake. There are big things at stake. So, listen, Josh, it's been a good, real, transparent conversation, and we could keep going. And we do want to hear from you. If there's anything, we can pray for you about, there's anything that you would love to ask or have questions about, please reach out to us. That email, thepastorpod@gmail.com. You can direct message us on social media, but Josh and I both have our own personal, not hard to find, Josh Robinson. You can see his beautiful face and his family's face on his social media, and J Mudd as well. So we'd love to hear from you. Josh, it's going to be exciting couple weeks coming up. We've got some guests coming in.
Yes.
And some
you want to share some of the names coming up,
guys,
or do you want it to be a secret?
No, we can share. We got Sam Rainer.
Well, next week.
On.
Yeah. Sam Rainer's coming on.
Sam Rainer's going to be here with us next week. And then next month, Mac Lake is going to be with us. And then Dr. Jimmy Scroggins is in he was just scheduled not too recently as well. So a lot of good quality pastors type of people who care about leadership, care about pastors, care about families, are all going to be with us having these good conversations. And our goal is to bring content to you that can encourage you and support you as you live out God's call in your life. And so that's really what we're all about here at the Pastor Pod. So Josh, for this week, I encourage pastors, be real, be transparent, build those relationships. And then we look forward to being back with you again next week as we have a conversation with Sam Rainer. And so from Josh and myself and the Pastor Pod, have a great week, and I hope to see you back next week.